Here's a question. Should the original 1980 Friday the 13th as a standalone film be considered a classic? Isn't that how it's supposed to go when you're talking about a beloved horror franchise? The original Nightmare on Elm Street? Classic. The original Halloween? Classic. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Classic. The original Friday the 13th? It's an interesting question, one that was asked on the official Friday the 13th website to a variety of responses. One commenter said, it would still be a classic. Look at Black Christmas, The Burning, and such. Those never had sequels and are classics in their own right, and they are 40 and 30 years old. While another commenter says, as much as I am a fan of the series, I have to heavily disagree. Friday the 13th has never really been viewed as a great horror film. The movie was simply a fun time, but it wasn't anything great or masterful, and was never celebrated as such. It is most certainly not regarded as having great writing, and its direction and cinematography also, most definitely, is not on the level of John Carpenter's Halloween. Friday was always rightfully seen as an imitator of what Carpenter did, without ever reaching that same artistic level and quality. There are indeed things to appreciate, but mostly cringe at in this movie. For instance, the movie is shot and edited in such a classic 80s slasher film style that it's hard not to wince. Just a little. It has dramatic pauses, dramatic zooms, and very dramatic slow-mo moments that are so cliche now, but were surely cool around the time the film was released. Now they're just outright hilarious shots that'll make you think, oh yes, this girl was killed not by Mrs. Voorhees, but by this pause shot of her. To give you some idea of the quality of the dialogue in this film, at one point a character asks a dog if he can speak English. This is not made up.
You speak English? How far is it to Camp Crystal Lake? That far, huh? Okie dokie. See you later.
But let's take a step back for a moment. Before Friday the 13th became a franchise, the success of the first film was a complete surprise to its producers. Why was it such a surprise? Well, because apparently there was no real ambition of it being a success. Definitely no foresight that it could become a franchise of its own, but franchise it would become. In an era where pretty much any successful movie is treated as a possible franchise, Friday the 13th rises far above the curve. 10 sequels, 1 reboot with another on the way, 1 TV show with another on the way, comic books, a video game, and countless trick-or-treaters with hockey masks and plastic machetes. Again, according to an interview in Esquire, the inaugural entry of the series was essentially intended as filler work. 2 years before working on Friday the 13th, director Sean S. Cunningham and his filmmaking team had collaborated on a low-budget comedy called Manny's Orphans. The film was a modest hit at the box office, and Cunningham hoped that its success might allow him and his collaborators to turn the film into a full franchise. However, the wait for approval to begin production on future Manny Orphans sequels ended up being longer than expected.
This country is going right down the toilet.
In order to keep his crew together and busy, Cunningham conceived of a quick and easy project that could be filmed with minimal effort, a slasher movie set at a summer camp.
Excuse me, how far is Camp Crystal Lake from here?
Indeed, the original Friday the 13th tells the simple story of a group of camp counselors preparing for a summer of fun at the secluded Camp Crystal Lake, only to be killed off one by one as a mysterious slasher stalks them. In the end, the murderer is revealed to be the deranged Pamela Voorhees, whose son, Jason, had drowned in the lake decades earlier. By the time Pamela is finally defeated, only one counselor has survived her rampage. Murdered teenagers aside, Friday the 13th bears little resemblance to the franchise it would spawn. Most notably, and famously, Jason is almost entirely absent. He appears only at the very end as a final jump scare that was originally intended as a dream sequence.
The boy. Is he dead too?
Who?
The boy, Jason.
Jason?
What's most striking about Friday the 13th is how little regard anyone but its fans seem to have for it. It seems fair to say that the only reason Friday the 13th is a classic is because of its sequels. The great thing about the Friday the 13th series is that each and every entry is different. You'll hear a lot of people say that the early ones are boring or the later ones are dumb. There's a whole range of movies with different tones, strengths, and weaknesses, and if you watch an entry and don't like it, chances are the next one will be totally different and more to your taste.
Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
Yes, many of these films' detractors would disagree with this assessment. Many will say that all these movies are just the same thing over and over, and that there is an overreaching slavish devotion to formula.
We better turn around.
Why?
Because I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly.
Now that is true to an extent, but it's still not really a fair assessment. Friday 1 versus Jason X is just night and day. Indeed, the series change periodically. 1 and 2 are similar, 3 and 4 are very different from 1 and only remotely similar to 2. 5 is more similar to a sexploitation quality version of 1. It's great. 6, 7, and 8 are Jason in full-fledged horror icon mode. 9 is what it is. X is campy silliness. Freddy vs. Jason is a Nightmare on Elm Street film with Jason in it. The remake is 2, 3, 4 all combined and updated for the 2000s. In his essay, Why Friday the 13th, writer Patrick Bromley pontificates on why these movies have been so resilient. One point he makes, for starters, it's the ultimate campfire tale. Literally. As early as part 2, the movies would show a group of campers and counselors gathered around a fire, sharing the tale of Jason Voorhees, the boy whose mother went on a mad murder spree at Camp Crystal Lake. The boy who is still out there, waiting to spring out and attack any one of us.
I mean, what would it be like today? Some kind of out-of-control psychopath? A frightened retard?
Both Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger are more regularly and more accurately referred to as the boogeyman. There's something about the oral tradition of Jason that lends itself to the longevity that the franchise would enjoy. He's a story passed down from camper to camper, from sequel to sequel, from horror fan to horror fan. As the folks over at IndieWire explained with their official ranking of the franchise, it took a while for Friday the 13th to become what everyone thinks of when they think Friday the 13th. The series started in earnest with the 1980 original, a clear attempt to copy the success of John Carpenter's Halloween that nonetheless proved a box office success and helped establish that the slasher genre was here to stay in popular film. The film ended on a twist that teased Jason was still alive, and he came back, now a fully grown adult, in the quickly made 1981 sequel. The 3D third film in 1982 saw him ditch the burlap sack he wore in part 2 in favor of the hockey mask that became his iconic look, and the formula was fully established. Across 9 other movies, Jason became one of the iconic horror slashers, engaging in all sorts of antics. He died twice, he got revived once, he fought Freddy Krueger, he barely took Manhattan, and of course he went to space. The franchise had its highs and its lows, and many false endings. But after Jason X, it largely went away, followed by a single crossover movie and a failed 2009 reboot. For over a decade, it lay dormant before prequel news surfaced last year, because Jason clearly doesn't stay dead forever. Most slasher franchises generally have at least one entry that's acclaimed by critics, even if the sequels fail to live up to standards. Friday the 13th doesn't really have that. From the very beginning, movies in the series were lucky to get mixed or tepid reviews from critics. Savage pans were much more common. And it's true that the series lacks a great film that measures up to a genuine classic like the original Halloween. Still, the franchise has a grip on horror fans for a reason. At its best, the lean, mean nastiness of the franchise's premise is a good vehicle for fun, creative kills. At the wackiest, there's some camp value to the absurdity of a movie where Jason Voorhees goes to space.
Oh, this sucks on so many levels!
The Friday the 13th series has a lot of bad movies, but even the worst of the movies have some sort of appeal.
Know-it-alls.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comment section.